Hi, thanks for joining the 2Inspire series here. With me is Kevan Lee, the VP of Marketing at Buffer. Hey, say hi, Kevin. A powerful social media management tool used by 3 million agencies, brands, publishers, and individuals. He's written articles for prestigious websites such as Entrepreneur, Time, Fast Company, and Inc. And you can also find him at the Buffer blog or at kevanlee.com. So welcome. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here.
Good. I mean, we look forward to having a quick chat about a number of topics related to kind of your experience and your perspective. But why don't you start by just telling us a little about yourself? What was your first job, and how did that kind of evolve into where you are today?
Absolutely, it was definitely an evolution. So I have been born and raised in Idaho, and in a very rural setting, and went to school up in Seattle for college. And I got a journalism degree in school, and it was around the time that newspapers were changing, the journalism industry was shifting, so I found myself looking for a different career path than what I had planned on for my whole life. And fortunately, social media became a thing right around that same time. So this was the early 2000s and really took off. And so did content marketing, this whole ecosystem that I didn't even know existed when I was in school. And so I took my writing passion and translated it into blogging. Blogging became content marketing, and I was very fortunate to be able to get some experience there and then turn that into a job at Buffer. So I joined Buffer as a content marketer, a writer, and there were about 17 of us at Buffer when I joined, and the team now is around 80 people. And so I've had a chance to expand my skill set and grow as a person and develop into the job that I have now, which is VP of Marketing. So I lead the team here. And I did come full circle. I'm back in Idaho again, so I get to work from home here. We're fully distributed around the world, so I run the team from here.
Cool. So you talked about the size of the marketing organization at Buffer. How do you, what strategies are you deploying through those people, and what are they focused on? If you could just give us some idea how you guys market and promote Buffer itself.
Absolutely. So out of our company of 80, there's around 10 or so who work primarily on marketing side. And we've split the marketing group into two buckets. We have a product bucket, then we have a content and brand bucket. And the product bucket is a great group of folks, and they are pretty deeply embedded onto the product teams themselves. So we'll have some product marketers, we'll have an engineer, a designer, kind of a lead to tie it all together. And they are very product focused. So whatever the product team's goals are, those are the marketers' goals. So if it's research, if it's acquisition, if it's retention, any type of growth metric, the product marketer exists to serve the needs of the product. Then on the brand and content side, it's a bit different. So that's where all of our content marketing occurs. And we really focus that side of things on awareness and reach. So we're measuring sessions to the blog, we're measuring listens and downloads to our podcast. Then on the brand side, we're making sure everything's high quality, and then we're thinking outside the box to try some new and creative things. We're going to look into video series this year, basically anything that can get the word out about Buffer and help people to build that bias for Buffer so that when they're ready to choose a social media tool, we're top of mind for them.
Sure. In what ways are you, measuring success both in those two groups? And is it objective based? Is it metric based? A combination of those? And how do you balance those two things?
Yeah, I'd say the product bucket is more metric based. So we'll look at our growth rate overall as a company. We'll end up breaking that down into levers. So for instance, we're looking at trial starts at this moment because that's the lever that we want to pull to impact that growth rate. Then on the brand and content side, it is a bit more deliverables. So we want to ship a new podcast by the end of Q3. We want to start a video series by Q4. We'll also look at reach, sessions, some of these larger traffic numbers. And then we do a fair amount of surveying on the awareness side. So we'll ask surveys and set some baselines based on brand reach and awareness there. So how well do people know that Buffer does what we do, and how much into the market have we got our positioning?
Good. And what channels do you find to be particularly effective to you guys, and how has that kind of changed over the years?
Yeah, that's a great one. So content has been kind of our calling card since I joined about 5 years ago. So we have our blog, that's our main source of awareness and traffic and reach for us, and that's several million a month and several million over the course of the year. So that's our primary focus there is through content. We also then will share all that on social media. So social media, we have some pretty big audiences there. We are a social media management tool, so of course that's kind of baked into our core of who we are. And we had a lot of success with podcasting recently. So we have a podcast that has 25,000 weekly listens, and we're going to be spinning off a new podcast. We found that that's great both for the raw numbers, but also for the personal connection that creates for us. When it comes to the product side, so we do have a lot of things that we can have some playbooks for launching and features. So we're big on product hunt whenever we send something out. We have some pretty strong email channels that we use to nurture a list and then to get some good opens and clicks when we do have something to share there.
Great. It's funny, well, not funny, I guess it's natural you mentioned the blog, so that's what I want to talk about next. So cool. You can lead me through this myself. So, I mean, the blog is the go-to destination, right, for anyone who's interested in, online marketing and online media. And how did you sort of manage to get it to this place where it is kind of the de facto leader? And then how do you keep, challenging yourself to up the game and kind of stay, the destination, right? Got to be a dicey proposition. How do you think about it?
It's a big task. Yeah, I'm grateful for the folks we have on our team who get us there. So when I joined Buffer, that was my primary job, was writing, and the blog at the time was very productivity and life hacking focused. And we got huge reach and lots of social shares through that content, but it didn't align with our business value proposition. So it wasn't really social media focused at the time. So we chose to pivot right as soon as I joined. So here I was thinking I was going to be right about one thing and was going to be learning something new. So that pivot was about 4 or 5 years ago, and we really started then just by building a lot of foundational content. So we'd write some articles that we knew would spread far and wide through social. So we would do things like the ideal length of everything, the best time to post, and these optimal timing, optimal frequency. And those posts were really popular, and so we got a lot of backlinks. Our domain authority increased really rapidly, and we ended up being this. We were in this fortunate position where we could write about any particular keyword or topic we wanted and be able to rank pretty quickly for that. And so then, we wrote 4 or 5 times a week and built up this really large library of SEO focused content. And the graphs for those, there's a little initial spike at first and then it tails off, but then it does pick back up over time. And so when you have, 50, 60 posts like that a year that are winners, the traffic really adds up and you end up showing up a lot in search and building that authority. So that was the foundation, the building of it. And then the maintenance of it has been, a whole other side too. So one of the popular strategies that I'm sure you all have heard about is the skyscraper technique, where you take a topic and you look at the best content out there for it, and then you write a piece of content that's 10 times greater than the best out there. And so we ended up being skyscrapered a lot, which is just the way it goes in content. So we then have to go back and the skyscrapers, I don't even know. It's too many skyscrapers at this point, but we have to keep refining our content to keep it updated, but then also make it the very best resource out there. We're not writing this to necessarily rank or to bring in sales for Buffer. We're writing it to help people, and so we want to create content that is supremely helpful, answers all the questions that they have. Social media moves fast, so something I wrote 2 years ago isn't going to be relevant or helpful today. And so we have a whole system of updating our old posts. We'll update the publication date as well, so Google senses that it's fresh content. And that has helped us stay on the top of the rankings. Search is still 80-90% of our traffic any given month, so that's a really big focus for us.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting challenge that you called out there, right? Is like how in this world of sort of measuring the effectiveness of your content distribution do you stay focused on the fact that I'm not, you're not creating content specifically to get viewed. You're creating content because you want to help people and kind of keeping that voice fresh. Is that something you kind of have to constantly check yourself internally around to make sure you're focused on like who you're delivering the message to, not the reach that you're hoping to get from a metrics perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting one because it does change your perspective a lot. So you have like a Google answer box, for instance, where someone can look for an answer, find it on a search result page, and never come to your site. And you have to be okay with that loss in traffic, so to speak. Like you're solving someone's problem, right, but you're not maybe seeing the actual numbers for it. We found that we had to understand our audience really well. So we would get a lot of people who would search for an answer, come to our site, read the blog post, and then take off and go somewhere else. And it's like, yeah, that might not look good in Google Analytics necessarily, but we helped that person. They got what they needed. They built this subconscious, implicit awareness of Buffer that we are someone they can go to trust. So maybe next time when they're searching, they'll look out for our URL. Maybe they hear about us in the space. Like kind of, it's a long play, I guess, in some ways. Sure. So we have an SEO focused strategy, which is like someone getting an answer, get it and leave. And we also have a different strategy for people who we expect to stay and subscribe and to stay in touch. And so we write different content for them. So yeah, it's kind of understanding both those audiences and being okay with the outcomes from each.
So when you think about, you guys clearly have a lot of experience, right? And developing really good content and then measuring the distribution. Like what advice or tips would you provide to, or have you provided to, individuals or companies that are feel pretty good about their content, but just are trying to figure out how to get the right reach and right traffic? Like what's the kind of get started kit and some key tips and strategies that you would share, to folks who might be listening to this?
Yeah, that's a great one. I would say that you need to look at content marketing as more of a long-term investment than a short-term game or growth hack. You need to be in it for the long haul. So you expect 9 to 12 month timelines if you're just getting started before you start seeing results that you want. And you're going to also notice that your distribution methods and your strategies are going to evolve over time. So initially it's going to be a lot more hands-on, do things that don't scale kind of approaches to be getting that distribution. Eventually you might hit on like a social distribution channel. Then eventually SEO, when you get to a certain size, that's going to be really the core of your growth. So understanding these different phases of blog growth is really important as well. And then when it comes to actually getting results from the content, we believe pretty strongly that you should have your CTAs do one job for you. So rather than have a CTA for an email, a CTA for your product, and a CTA for read this next thing and this next thing, like all over the place. If you really focus it, we did this for email signups a couple of years ago, and it was huge. It was, every CTA had the same job to perform, and it made a very cohesive experience. We're very big on user experience on the blog, so our users, our readers had a great experience, but also led to good results because you're capturing people at these different points. They're going to have banner blindness somewhere, some way. So the one spot where they don't have a blind spot, let that be the thing that you want to ultimately get that outcome for in your blog.
Sure. And as I'm thinking about those same things through a B2C lens versus a B2B lens, how might I deploy thoughts or strategies differently?
Yeah. So B2C and B2B, we've kind of been in this interesting intersection of B2C to B, so we kind of write for it all. I would say that if you're thinking B2C and B2B, typically when we look at B2B, we look at more of the buying journey. So we want to start with consideration and then end up with the purchase intent at the very end. So we want to kind of walk them through this stage. So we'll have top of funnel content, we'll have middle of funnel content, we'll have bottom of funnel content, and it's different types of content for each of those different sections. For the B2C, where we typically focus quite a bit more on top of funnel, it tends to be a shorter journey for them. It's top of funnel has been the stuff that's been really successful for us. So those are the things that typically will go well on social media. So the ideal length of everything, optimal times to post, kind of the life hacking productivity stuff that we used to do on the blog was really successful in the B2C space. So we tend to focus more on that. And then when it comes to B2B, we do get a bit more rigid, or I guess a bit more disciplined about how we work someone through that funnel.
Sure. And then how do you think about, obviously in the B2B space, you talked about more of a rigid discipline around funnel management, and so that leads to sales. How do you help, companies or other folks connect the dots between all the awareness driven in the B2C space and ultimately, the bottom line results? Like what's the, I've seen companies struggle with that. So I'm curious what your perspective is.
Yes, and we're a bit different too. So we don't have a sales team at Buffer. We don't do much lead nurture. If we get a bunch of email lists, email addresses from a list, we don't really do anything with them. we stick them on the blog list. So a lot of it really is about not forcing the sale on someone when they're not ready for it. And so we tend to take this approach of capture people when they come in, let them feel like they're invited to be part of your brand experience. And when they're ready, they will join, they will sign up for the product. So we take more of an approach of consistency, reliability. We have a publishing schedule that we try to keep close to. We have an email schedule that we try to keep close to, because we can't ever fully predict when someone's going to be ready. So we always make it, let's try to be front and center in their mind. So no matter what stage they're at, we don't tend to see it so much as like a pure funnel. We kind of see it as more of a loop of sorts, and people move rapidly on that loop or slowly on that loop. And as long as we're present, I think that's the thing that we tend to optimize for over everything else.
That makes sense. What are some of the common mistakes that you see, companies make in either developing or maintaining their kind of social media, presence?
Yeah, there can be a lot of pitfalls on that path for sure. I think one of the main ones is trying to be everywhere.
Okay.
There's a couple of risks there. There's the first risk, like if you're smaller, stretching yourself too thin. There's so many different places to be on social these days. If you try to do it all, it's going to be asking a lot. And then the other risk is that you're going to not deliver a great brand experience everywhere if you're spread that thin as well. So if you have a presence everywhere, chances are one or two of those spots is going to be great. The other spots might not be that great, and your audience is going to have an entry point like wherever they're most interested. Like if you're not really focused on Pinterest and it's kind of fallen by the wayside, that might be someone's only reference point to you and your brand. So there's some risk there that I think companies in their enthusiasm to get on social, they may not consider all the ramifications of not doing social well in those spots. I think another one is not really catering to the audience on each network. So I think this is less and less the case now, but I think some businesses still do fall in the trap. We phrase it as a spray and pray approach, where you just kind of spray the same message everywhere and pray that it sticks with 2 or 3 people out there. And that is not the way social media is most successful these days. We want to be customizing our message for each platform, and also shifting from this mentality of a bullhorn, a megaphone, to more of a conversation between 1 or 2 or 3 people. I think that's where social media is shifting overall. And it's obvious the brands that do that well, and it's obvious the ones that have not quite caught up to that trend just yet. So if you're seeing the same message being blasted on multiple social networks, that's just not going to get the results that you want. And it's not going to reflect as well on your brand.
Yeah. Are there particular examples of either products or brand that you think do a really good job, and kind of what is it about that would be an important takeaway for somebody that might be listening to this discussion?
Yeah. So some of the brands that we really admire, we have one like Allbirds, the shoe, the shoe selling company. They have a wonderful Instagram presence, and it's unique from some of their other social profiles too. Like Instagram by its nature is a very visual social media platform, so their feed is very visual, but they also understand that stories is kind of an extension of the feed, but it can be so much more too. Like it's behind the scenes, it's sharing user-generated content from customers who are reaching out and tagging Allbirds. Like it's a very rich experience on stories. It's a very visual and beautiful experience in their feed. And if you go to their other social profiles, you'll see like there's some of that. It's all on brand everywhere, but it's a different voice. It's kind of like a different voice or tone when you hit these different locations. One of my favorite ones that I've come across recently is a group called Ugly Drinks. They are flavored carbonated water that is a subscription service, so like LaCroix, but a bit different. And they have a really fun presence. So they do a lot of memes on Instagram, but they also do a lot of user-generated content as well. And you kind of see these strategies evolving from different spots. So on Twitter, it can be more text-based. On Instagram, it's going to be more visual and user-generated content-based. And the brands that embrace that, like Ugly, Allbirds, pretty much anyone in the D2C space, e-commerce space, is doing it really well.
Good. And then, in your own experience, right, maybe some things that you've been involved in or been really close to, like you have some examples maybe where you embarked on a strategy that didn't go so well, and what did you take away from that to apply next time?
Yeah, boy, lots of examples of that. This one I wouldn't say didn't go well, but I think it taught us a very important lesson. So we had a Twitter chat that existed for many, many years and was and is a great part of our brand history. And it was very hard to make the call to stop doing that Twitter chat. It's been, I think, a year ago exactly. And the lesson that I took away from that is, I guess, in one sense, it's trust your gut. Like we saw social media trends shifting, we saw attention shifting, we saw user expectations shifting on social networks, and we thought it was telling us that maybe a Twitter chat was not the thing anymore, but it was such a big part of our brand, it was very hard for us to actually come to terms with that. And so looking ahead, like how can we apply that lens to these other things that we're doing? How can we question these long-standing things we've been doing for a long time that may not be as effective as they used to be, or may just need a little reinvention of sorts? So that's one big thing. One of my lessons from early on was podcast advertising, which I think is now I could probably try it again. I think it's been long enough. But when I first tried it, like I did not know what I was doing at all. It was like, oh, podcast advertising seems like it's a good idea. So here I'm throwing some money at some podcasts. And I think if I were to do that again, I would not chase the trend. I would seek to understand the trend before I chase the trend. I think I was too eager, and let's jump in there. And I enjoy that scrappy mentality of jump in and figure it out. I think I needed to figure it out and then jump in. And so applying that to other spots too, like I would have been more disciplined about, having a way to measure the success of that, having a landing page, maybe having an offer ready, working on the copy more for the script and things. So those are a couple that come to mind.
No, that makes sense. Because one thing I'd like to ask is, when you think about companies like delving into using more social media techniques and even having content driven by the community right outside of that, like how like historically, right, that means kind of losing a little bit of control of maybe the dialogue and message around your brand. How do you help make companies or people that you advise kind of comfortable with that and not sort of overreacting necessarily or to something that might come back that's not kind of exactly what you'd hope for? Seems like a bit of a delicate balance, and certainly in my experience, I've seen companies kind of struggle with attempting to be too controlling. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that is a good one. We tend to be pretty open when it comes to the advice that we give. Like, don't control the experience is probably our most common advice. And I think maybe I should rephrase that. The way that you control the experience is by being very consistent yourself with your voice and tone as a brand. And so eventually, like, you kind of train your audience and your tribe to recognize that voice and tone and to kind of mirror that back to you in their interactions with you. But at the same time, you're still going to get outliers and some folks who are maybe not on message in the way that you might like them to be. For us, it's important that we respond to everyone, whether they're on message or not. I think when it comes to user-generated content, you feature the stuff that you want to encourage more of, and so you're finding, in our case, we would be looking for positive messages from our community that reflect our values, and reposting those, putting those to our stories, retweeting them on Twitter, different things like that. And eventually you kind of cultivate this culture of positivity or values that you want for your company. You're also going to get those outliers, of course. And again, we do respond to everyone, we engage with everyone, we start those conversations. I think it's the worst thing you can do is just leave them be and let them spin out of control on their own. I think that absentee approach is not what works on social media for us these days. We want to be sure that we're engaging even when it's not something that maybe what we wanted.
That makes sense. Hey, you guys are a huge resource for people to come to stay up to date on trends and content and stuff in the space. Where do you go to learn new stuff and challenge your current conventional wisdom and look at trends? Like, what's your go-to spot or spots?
Yeah, there's a few. So there's one called The Interface, which is run by Casey Newton from The Verge, and he talks a lot about kind of tech from a very broad sense. There's someone called Matt Navarra. He used to work for The Next Web, and he's now, I think he runs his own social media agency, so his Twitter account is great to follow.
Okay.
And then there's a few newsletters that speak specifically to brands that we get a lot of inspiration from. There's one called 2 p.m. There's one called Lean Lux, Luxe, Leanluxe, and one called Loose Threads, and they kind of talk about the emerging direct-to-consumer space. So they're great for insights.
Excellent.
And then I personally have kind of a strategy where I follow 10 or so brands on each of the social networks pretty closely, and I swap them in and out as the weeks go by, so there's always fresh stuff. And I just learn from what they're doing on there, and so I'll notice what they're doing, try to replicate it myself on some test accounts I have set up, and just kind of learn the process of what these folks are actually doing in the real world. I think there's little that can replace that very hands-on, real-time experience of what these brands are doing and trying it yourself.
Cool. Do you have I'll step back a little bit to kind of like how you attack the day, not necessarily.
Sure.
So do you have a favorite kind of tool or favorite app that you kind of lean on more than others?
Yeah, I have like a Mount Rushmore of tools that I that I have. So Trello is one. I could do, and give me any job, I could find a way to make Trello fit with it. So I use it for keeping myself organized day to day. We use it for our editorial calendars at Buffer. I use it for goal tracking. I use it for, like, you name it. I use it for my management, like so many different things I use Trello for. I use Pocket religiously. So anytime I see something online that I want to read, I will add it to Pocket and then try to get through my Pocket once a week or so. I tend to have a backlog of articles to read in there, but I try to make my way through. And Feedly is another big one for me. So I love, as you can tell, like getting started in Buffer through the blog, like blogs are a huge part of my life still to this day. And so I pull in tons of different content sources into Feedly, and their mobile app is great. So I scroll through the mobile app, once or twice a week just to clear things out and add things to Pocket and then read them. Then of course it all goes to Buffer to share later. So I have a little system set up for myself.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So what's some, you mentioned your kind of journey to the position you're in. It's been a bit of an evolution. What's some of the best advice that you kind of received along the way?
Yeah, there's a couple of different pieces. The first is when I was joining Buffer, it was absolutely amazing. The founders are just wonderful. And one of them asked me what I want to do at Buffer long term, like where I see myself in a couple of years. And this was like a few weeks after joining. So I was like, I'm just enjoying the ride. Like I have no idea. I didn't even think about it. And eventually this evolved into a conversation about personal ambition. And I explained that, I don't feel like I have ambition in the way that I would expect others to have ambition. Like I don't feel like I need to become a VP of marketing in 2 years. I'm not on this particular track to CMO, or I want this or that or the other thing. And it was explained to me that, first of all, that's totally okay. Ambition can look a lot of different ways, but that this approach of just making the most of whatever opportunity is in front of you can be a totally fine approach as well. And I feel like I really took that to heart, where a door opened and I walked through it. Another door opened and I walked through it. I didn't have to have it planned out every single step along the way, just make the most of the opportunities that were there. So that was huge for me in my career, just stepping through those doors. And I think along with that is this concept of having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. I'm probably ashamed to say, like in the past, I think I had a fixed mindset where like I have a journalism degree, I'm on the journalism path. I do not have any other skills to contribute. This is what I spent time and money on. So this has to be it. And now it's a growth path where it's like I could reinvent myself tomorrow after this conversation if I wanted to. Like sometimes I dream of learning how to code, or last night I was dreaming of learning how to be like in a hip hop dance group. And it's like, is that even possible? Like I don't know, but in my mind I'm like, I can at least explore those paths, and I feel comfortable, I guess more comfortable in myself in that growth mindset of being capable of trying new things and learning new things.
Yeah, that's really good perspective. Thanks, Kevin. Along the way, and to the context of some of the self-discovery, like are there particular people that you find sort of inspirational that you follow regularly, or that you're kind of, you mentioned a couple on the call, like who do you look up to when you're looking for advice?
Yeah, I try to look to people who are different than me, so different in different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different genders. Like I want to be inspired by a variety of people and experiences. So one person who's been really instrumental to me, his name is Heaton Shah. He's a many times over founder of lots of different companies, Kissmetrics. He's working on a product called FYI now, and really great mentor and advisor for me. He's always great whenever I reach out for email. There's a couple of people on my team who I have some really deep and wonderful relationships with. Courtney Sider, she leads our people team. Katie Womersley, she leads our engineering team. And Carolyn Koprash, she leads our product team. And having them in my life has been great. They've given me wonderful perspectives and advice on things. And yeah, then I have just like Twitter lists and different people I follow to make sure I'm getting these different perspectives in as well. And it's been really healthy. It's been great.
Cool. Well, to that end, do you have some things in 2019 that you want to try or push yourself to do that you've never done before?
Yes, yes, I do.
I just said that you can share. Let's start with that.
Oh, I can share anything. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to start my own podcast, and I'm like 20% of the way there. So I've recorded 4 episodes, and now they're just sitting there. my desktop kind of taunting me a little bit because I have to edit them and make them sound good. So that's something I would love to try. I would love to get personally to 10,000 followers on Instagram, and that is super hard. I'm at 200 right now, so if anyone's listening and wants to follow me there, that'd be great. That would help. I want to learn how to bake bread, so I wanted to get a little sourdough starter, and I purchased a book so far, so that's a good first steps. But get a sourdough starter and get really good at bread. I think those should keep me pretty busy.
Sounds like it. So are there things that you're going to push Buffer to do that maybe it hasn't done before in 2019?
Yeah, so for Buffer, we have some exciting things. So we want to launch a new podcast. I think I hinted at that earlier. So we have an existing podcast, which is great. We want to do one that's a bit more storytelling focused, narrative focused. So we're going to try that. We want to do a video series. So similar to what Wistia has done, they've been super inspiring for us with their 110-100 series. We want to do something Netflix worthy, so super highly produced and interesting to do there. And then we want to get a lot better with, I guess, our data tracking and growth, and be a bit more data informed in some of the decisions that we make in terms of channels to choose and tactics to try, and overall like pulling the right levers for the company. I think there's maybe like a pendulum of data informed and not data informed. I think we tend to swing back and forth. So I think 2019 is a bit more of a swinging toward the data side for us.
Speaking of data, are there some trends in digital marketing that maybe are overlooked by some folks, or that aren't being highlighted enough that our listeners could spend more time paying attention to?
Yeah, in terms of the data side, one thing that's becoming more important for us is the idea of multi-touch attribution. This concept has been around for a very long time, but I think it's especially important these days when you're considering things like ROI for social media, or influencer marketing is big, podcasting, video, some of these that can be more top of funnel, more reach and awareness focused. Like, how do they actually tie back to ROI? So if you can put together some multi-touch attribution models, even some kind of quick and dirty ones, just to give you a general sense of things, I think that's going to be super helpful. Then there are some really neat tools in terms of audience insights that have come out recently. And so you might look at, how that ties in with your ad strategy and your social strategy, and then your user list. Like, how can you tie these different audiences that you've built up and maintained and managed in these different spots? How can you tie them all together so that you're painting this bigger brand experience picture? And I think data is the thread that ties those things together for brands.
Great. And then if I'm a brand who's, either currently global or thinking about expanding globally, like how should I think about managing a international sort of social profile, right? And all the complications or permutations of that. How do you guys manage it, right? As Buffer's clearly a global brand.
Yeah, that is a great one. Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is this idea of like, when you're global, you're always online, right? Like, there's always going to be someone. The sun never sets on you when you're global. And so we're lucky that our approach to work, we are a fully remote team distributed around the world. So we can't have someone online at every hour of the day. Like, when I log off, someone in Asia Pacific logs on, and then when they log off, someone in Europe logs on. So that round the clock coverage is great. And then we support that with a tool that we, within Buffer, there's a tool called Reply that lets you kind of collect all those social media conversations in one inbox. So we have a team that manages those 24/7. And just being responsive in that way, it sends a really powerful message to your international audience that you recognize them as people in this place that maybe is not where your headquarters is or where you haven't been before, but like, you are intentionally making time and space and committing resources and energy to them where they're at. Like, they don't have to wait until your business hours to hear a response from you. Like, whatever that person's business hours are the company's business hours now. And so like that always online approach is really wonderful, and especially if you have the team organized in a way that you can manage it.
Great. And so, what's next for Buffer? Like, what any new features or things on the horizon you want to kind of tease out or give us a sneak peek into?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we're really embracing this idea of brand experience, visual marketing, kind of the direction that social media is going, and we think Instagram is leading the way. So we're gonna have some neat Instagram features coming out soon. Some things like first comment and some powerful things for the link in bio functionality. So keep an eye out for that stuff. And we also have an analytics product that has been in beta for a while now, and it's going to be making its way out into the public soon too. And there's some really cool stuff in there in terms of insights, answers, and we have stories analytics. So it's going to be a really powerful addition to social media teams' toolboxes.
Great. And then any other, sort of final thoughts you'd like to leave, sort of the consumers of this webinar, before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation. I think the themes that I'm pulling out is just the importance of understanding where social is at today and taking time to survey the landscape before you dive in fully. I think, especially if you're working like with an e-commerce perspective in mind, there's so many wonderful things that social networks allow when it comes to shopping and e-commerce these days. And if you can embrace those tools and features, you're going to be ahead of the game, and you're also going to be seeing those. We talked about data. You're going to be seeing the results come in terms of ROI and revenue and everything. So social media is moving toward e-commerce, is moving toward this, whatever the consumer needs kind of mentality. And I think that's going to be really powerful for businesses.
Great. And if folks want to reach out to you and get more insights or find out more, where would you direct them?
Absolutely. Well, kind of shamelessly, I will plug my Instagram since that is on my goal list for this year. So if you head to Instagram, I'm at Kevan Lee there, KevanLee. Same on Twitter, same on LinkedIn. My website is kevanlee.com. And then the Buffer blog and the Buffer website would be great to check out too. So buffer.com is the website. If you go to buffer.com/resources, you'll be able to access all of our social media resources.
So, well, thank you, Kevin. I really enjoyed the discussion as well, and certainly to sort of all of the folks out there, consuming this 2Inspire series. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you found it valuable as well. Look out for more. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Kevin.